ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ ව්‍යවස්ථාවට සහ නීතියට අනුකූලව අවංකව ඉටු කරන බවටද ශ්‍රී ලංකා ජනජයට පක්ෂපාත වන බවටද මාගේ උපරිම ශක්ති ප්‍රමාණයෙන් ශ්‍රී ලංකා ප්‍රජාතාන්ත්‍රික සමාජවාදී ජනරජයේ ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ දේශය තුල වෙනම රජයක් පිහිටවීමට
Anura Kumara Dissanayake was elected president of Sri Lanka on Sunday. He was able to ride on a wave of popular anger at the established political order which has dominated Sri Lanka for the last 50 years. The country, which was on the brink of economic collapse 2 years ago, saw its first presidential election since an IMF bailout which rescued it from the brink. This is a remarkable turnaround for Dissanayake and his left-wing party, the JVP, after he had won just 3% of the vote in the last election in 2019. From a mere 3% to now over 40% in the space of one election cycle is truly a remarkable turnaround for the 50-year-old party that he heads, the Janata Vimukti Peramuna, and for its leader, who is popularly known by his initials, AKD. The extreme left-wing party, which led two unsuccessful armed uprisings against the Sri Lankan state, one in 1971 and the other in 1987, is today at the center of Sri Lanka's polity. It was brought to power after popular and angry protests at the state of the economy, which was believed to be run to the ground by the Rajapaksa family. The popular outpouring of anger, called Aragalaya, or simply protest in Sinhalese, culminated in the toppling of the then strongman president Gotabaya Rajapaksa. He fled the capital city, Colombo, and lived abroad for a period of time. Anura Dissanayake, 55 years old, had in recent years led a rebranding effort of his party that was once known for deadly armed insurrections. He managed to build a large coalition, he softened some of the radical positions of his party, and he pitched it as the alternative to the deeply rooted politics of patronage which has dominated Sri Lanka and dominated by the two main parties, the SLFP and the UNP. Dissanayake secured 42% of the high voter turnout in Saturday's election. His closest competitor, the opposition leader Sajith Premadasa, received just about 33% of the votes cast, and the incumbent president, 75-year-old Ranil Wickremesinghe, managed just a mere 17% of the vote. In a sign of how enormous a swing it was in the island nation's political landscape, Dissanayake's immediate challenge would be to form his new cabinet. As per Sri Lanka's system, the cabinet ministers must come from the parliament, where the new president's party only has 3 seats. His officials, though, say that the new president has constitutional options to oversee the work of these ministries, while he calls for new parliamentary elections in the coming few months. Parliament will have to be dissolved because this parliament has already lost the mandate of the people. In Sri Lanka's ranked choice election system, voters can mark either one candidate on their ballot, or they can list out 3 candidates in order of preference. If no candidate gets more than 50%, then a second round of counting factors in the preferences of those voters whose first choice did not make it to the top 2. At the end of a peaceful vote on Saturday, the government had made a surprise announcement: overnight curfew, even as the counting had begun. There were fears of some kind of a coup, once again to keep the established political order going. But those fears did not come to pass, as by Sunday morning it was clear that Dissanayake had created a big political upset of sorts. He railed against the prevailing consensus in Sri Lanka's politics, against both the SLFP and the UNP, which have dominated for the last 50 years. There was also high praise from leaders of the country's minority groups, as well as from activists, for an election campaign which was unlike any other in the past. It was not violent, it was not divisive. This time, the campaigns had happened largely without any recourse to racial or religious chauvinism. Even though Dissanayake's party has in the past been accused of being anti-Tamil and anti-Muslim, the two major minorities in Sri Lanka. There have been concerns in neighbouring India about some of the extreme positions taken by Dissanayake and his party in the past. The JVP is perhaps the only mainstream party in the Sri Lankan system which has not agreed to the full implementation of the 13th Amendment. This would pave the way for the full devolution of powers to local provinces, including the northern province, which is dominated by the minority Tamils. That was one of the cornerstone clauses of the 1987 Indo-Sri Lanka Peace Accord. Dissanayake is also perceived to be pro-China given his party's Marxist leanings. But he did make an official visit earlier this year to New Delhi and met with Foreign Minister Dr. Jaishankar. In his first comments after the win, the president-elect has also said that he wants better ties with all countries, including with India. India would not want a return of Chinese influence after the Rajapaksa years, when major projects like the Colombo port, the Hambantota airport and port, and others were given to Chinese companies. It took a near economic collapse and $4 billion of Indian assistance for some of that goodwill towards India to return to the island nation. It is the first time that a presidential election in Sri Lanka has appeared to be genuinely multi-pronged. It is a stark contrast to what has been a history of direct competition between the two major parties, the SLFP and the UNP, or coalitions headed by these two parties, and these politics have dominated ever since Sri Lanka became a republic in 1972. The popular protest movement Aragalaya that forced the powerful Rajapaksa clan out of power in 2022 threw open the political landscape. The dominant feeling among a vast majority of poor Sri Lankans was a sense of anger and a sense of being let down by the political system. When Gotabaya Rajapaksa had put accusations of war crimes during the country's bloody civil war back in 2009, he had put those accusations behind him. He made a handsome win in the 2019 election, but then within the next few months, because COVID struck, his management of the Sri Lankan economy led to his downfall. Before its fall, the Rajapaksa government had become a family affair. The two brothers, Mahinda and Gotabaya Rajapaksa, had served as president and prime minister, taking turns. There were also others in the clan who had held several ministries and key positions, but its fall has been so thorough that Namal Rajapaksa, who is the family's 38-year-old political heir, in this election finished a distant fourth. He had a single-digit share of the votes. Ranil Wickremesinghe, the 75-year-old political survivor who stepped in as interim president after Gotabaya Rajapaksa fled the country when protesters surrounded his house, has helped stabilize the country. He's negotiated a bailout package with the International Monetary Fund. And now Anura Dissanayake, who has positioned his National People's Power Coalition, built around his old party, the JVP, as the largest partner, is best positioned to deliver the public demands of the protest movement. They want Sri Lanka's deeply entrenched political system of patronage and corruption to be cleaned up. He's also brought in new faces at the top. He's focused on reaching out to mobilizing women who were a particularly big constituency for him and who are particularly hard hit by the economic collapse of the country. He's also softened his own party's old radical Marxist messaging. The economy was a central issue in the campaign, with poorer people continuing to feel the pinch of austerity measures that the interim government had put in place. They had increased taxes, they reduced subsidies, and all of this was hurting the poor very much. The economic collapse saw poverty rates double, with a quarter of the population of Sri Lanka today living below the poverty line. In the end, it is the vast majority of the poor of Sri Lanka who brought forth the son of an agricultural laborer from Anuradhapura into the highest office of the land.